Welcome back to another episode of the Financial Flourish podcast, where we empower women to build wealth and find financial freedom. I'm your host, Michele Pemberton, and today we're talking about something that has the power to shift not just your finances, but your faith, your focus, and your future. Today's episode is called The Power of Visualization and Money Affirmations. And if you've been listening to us over the past weeks, you would have heard us talk about visualization and money affirmations with the two amazing psychiatrists, Dr. Monique Upton and Dr. Kelly Singletary, who have been guests of our show for the last, I would say, 5 weeks. So, as we get into the topic, let me ask you something. Have you ever worked so hard to reach a financial goal? Maybe you even succeeded on paper, but deep down you still felt anxious? Or maybe you wanted to start a new budget, save consistently, or earn more money, but you just can't seem to get past the fear, the self doubt, or the old habit? No, that's because transformation doesn't begin with a spreadsheet, it begins with a thought. And we're going to go through visualization, affirmations, and journaling, which are some of the tools that they have told us that we needed to use in order to overcome some of these limiting beliefs and also to reach our point of financial freedom based on our financial goals. So these are not motivational tips. They've been proven that they actually work, and we've seen ways supported by neuroscience, by spiritual practices, by scripture if you're Christian minded. And what it does is that it renew your mind and reshape your relationship with money. So settle in. Let's get this episode started. Let's see if it can reset your mind and reintroduce the version of you who's already there, the one that's free, the one that's worthy, and the one that is equipped for your financial freedom. So the mind is very powerful, and we've seen this in our episode. We're actually in the season of the money mindset reboot, and we are going to go over some of this information that we've covered. I've done some additional research, and I'll be quoting, different neuroscientists and persons who can help us break down this information and see how we can use these mindset tools for our good. So there's a book called The Biology of Belief, and it's by Dr. Bruce Lipton. And he explains in his book that 95% of our decisions are driven by our subconscious mind. So these are the automatic programs that we absorb in childhood, through experiences or emotional moments. And what that means is that even if your conscious mind is saying, I want to build wealth, your subconscious mind might be saying something else. It might be saying, money is hard. I'm bad with money. I'm bad with numbers, which people are greedy, because this is what we've been hearing not just from our childhood, but also as adults. And so what happens is that we start sabotaging the progress we're trying to make with these subconscious thoughts. And what you have to recognize, ladies, is that you're not lazy. It's not that you lack all this discipline, but it's the inner script that has not yet caught up with your external goals. And if you are Christian minded, I've spoken on several occasions about renewing your mind, and the Bible talks about renewing your mind. And this is not a metaphor. This is actually an invitation, something that we actually do. Now, according to neuroscientists, and we're going to look at Dr. Norman Doidge, he talks about neuroplasticity, and this is the ability for your brain to change. Your brain, as Dr. Singletary, who spoke about your brain changing from the old habits and making new habits, so you can introduce new thoughts, you can have new language. And this is a tool that matters because it's not just about positive thinking, but it's actually mental architecture. She spoke about the different things in our brain that help us to change, that we can actually change. So these tools can build a new environment to help you flourish in your finances. So we're going to look at the first tool, and the first tool is visualization. And this is actually the practice of intentionally imagining your desired outcome. You can see what you want in your mind's eye. You can start thinking about the successes that you're looking for. And this matters because according to Harvard Health publishing, when you vividly imagine an experience, whether it's, generously giving or checking your bank account with joy, your brain fires the same neural circuits as if you're actually doing it. So can you imagine that if you start thinking about something, your brain is now acting as if it's happening. Now, we see Olympians, they use visualization before every event. And we have examples. Serena Williams, she has spoken about seeing the trophy before even entering the court. So she's using visualization. Michael Phelps, the swimmer, he visualized every stroke of his race before diving in. So if the elite athletes can use it for gold, why can't we use it for our financial peace? And we can do this by practicing visualization. We can sit in a quiet place, whether you're praying or you're meditating, and then you close your eyes and take some deep breaths. And then you can picture your most peaceful financial day. That might include checking your account and seeing that you have more than enough, or you can be sitting in a home you own and working in peace, or giving to a friend in need without flinching. So those are three things you can do. And then next you can add some emotion to it. So say, how does it make me feel? Do I feel joyful? Do I feel freeing? Do I feel secure? And then you can thank God for it, as if it's already true. And this has to do with faith. And we've spoken about faith versus fear in our finances. And then you can write it down. It's building your mental blueprint for what your nervous system one day will recognize as normal. And we see this in Dr. Joe Dispenza's teaching. He has a book that's called Breaking the Habit of Being Yourself. And you must emotionally experience your future now before it becomes visible, because your body is always eavesdropping on your mind. I find this like a interesting quote, that he says your body is always eavesdropping on your mind. So your mind goes ahead with what is happening, and then your body gets caught up to it. So that's visualization. So you're looking at what you want, you're seeing it in your mind's eye already, and you're making your body, move towards what your mind is thinking. So the next is affirmations. Now, affirmations are present tense, truth based statements that help you rewrite your limiting beliefs. So you start speaking what you want, you speak it as if it is. And one of the persons that we're going to look at is Dr. Carolyn Leaf, and she's a Christian cognitive neuroscientist. And she teaches that every thought you think and every word you speak wires your brain for two things, either for health or to harm. And she outlines this in her book, Switch on Your Brain. She writes that affirmations literally change your brain chemistry, and more importantly, they align your thoughts with God's truth. So, if you're Christian minded, again, Proverbs 18:21 says, life and death are in the power of the tongue. So, everything that you say, all your affirmations, is either feeding into your fear, which is harmful, or feeding into your faith, which is helpful. So, a lot of times we already have our affirmations, but they are normally not really good. For example, you might say, oh, I can't afford that. And we spoke about, hearing that so often. I'll never figure this out, or it's too late for me, and it's never too late. Where there's life, there's hope. But you can change these. You can say something like, I'm a wise steward of all I receive, or wealth flows to me through aligned ethical means, or I'm breaking generational patterns and building a legacy. Why not say these? Say them out aloud, say them out often, because your subconscious learns through emotion and repetition. It's not about logic. Now, the third tool that we're going to look at is journaling. And this is not just you're in a bad mood, so you take up your pen and paper and start venting. This is actually a guided dialogue between your spirit and your thoughts. It brings hidden beliefs to light, and it gives you space to challenge them. And we have another neuroscientist who's Dr. James Pennebaker of the University of Texas. And he found that expressive writing improves immune function, mental clarity, and decision making. So when it comes to your finances, if you start journaling, you're going to find out how many limiting beliefs that you have. And you will uncover these in journaling where you can't really do that in a spreadsheet. So that's very important. One of the things you can do is say, what do I believe about wealth and where did this belief come from? And we've spoken about this before, so you should have this information already written down. You can say, what emotion comes up when I look at my bank account? You can start thinking of how does that make you feel and what would it look like to build wealth with peace, not pressure. So you can find out a lot more about yourself. Don't censor yourself, just write it out. And then you can make a declaration at the end. Or if you're Christian minded, you can get a scripture to back up what you're reading. For example, if you want to do a declaration, you could say, I'm learning to manage debt with wisdom and grace. And you can look at a scripture that says God will supply all your needs, and that would rewrite your fear that's saying that you're afraid that you'll never get out of debt. And we know that that's not true because God will supply all your needs and you can manage your debt with wisdom and grace. All these are really good tools: visualization, affirmation, and journaling that you can use. And you can put something in place. Make it part of your morning routine. The research has shown that morning is the most influential time of day for your mindset because your brain, the theta alpha state for the first 30 to 60 minutes after you wake up. And so it's easy for you to get new beliefs, thoughts, and emotional cues, and that's a study done by Harvard Health. So if you start your day with an open mind for peace, for clarity, for good decisions, it will carry you throughout the day. And you can do this quickly by, having gratitude, doing some visualization, as we spoke about earlier. You can do some affirmations. And then once that is done, if you're meditating, you can do meditation or you could read a scripture, and then you do some journaling. You put that information out so that you know exactly how you're feeling. You can look back at it and see how it's helping you to get to the point of financial freedom. And in journaling, it's not venting, but just talking about yourself and seeing the truth of it. So I came up with a small example. You can say something like, today I realize I still feel guilt about having more than others. I visualized giving freely and joyfully, and it felt so good. And God reminded me that blessing others doesn't start with shame, it starts with overflow. And my affirmation today is, I release guilt and embrace grace in my giving. So that would be an example of, a routine you'll have that you can use. And then in the evening, you can do the same thing. You reflect on the day, you see what financial wins you had that day, and it doesn't have to be anything big. It can be a small win. Maybe you decided not to buy that coffee that you normally buy because you realize that money that you use to buy the coffee can be used for something else, right? Once you do that reflection, then you can see if you had any negative thoughts that came up, see if you were afraid of anything concerning finances for that day, and then you end with a prayer or meditation or whatever you do, and then you just release control to God because He's the one who controls everything. Once you do this often enough, then you start retraining your mind for peace and not for panic. Then you have a purpose. You're not pressured into doing anything. So these are some things that can help you with your mindset. Your affirmations and your visualization, they actually work. You can see it with athletes. And I know that it has worked for me in my personal life, and I've seen positive outcomes for visualization and affirmation. So I definitely say that you should try this. Now, I just want you to remember that you don't have to wait for external circumstances to change before you experience peace. You can begin now by changing the conversation in your mind. It's funny because I was speaking to someone about this very same thing last week, and he was saying that he is not going to say that he has more than enough. If he looks in his bank account and there's no money, he's not going to use that affirmation. But what we have studied here is that you need to train your body. Your subconscious goes first. And I'm not saying that you just do this and it automatically happens. But what happens in your mind is that once you start using these affirmations, once you start journaling, once you start visualizing, your brain automatically start making decisions towards whatever you're visualizing. So it's not just sit down and visualize and then don't do anything to make sure that it happens, but it actually helps in conjunction with visualization, retraining your brain, as the neuroscientist said, and then that would help you to make decisions that are more aligned with your financial goals. So you don't have to wait for the external circumstances to change before you experience peace. You can begin now by changing the conversation in your mind, the renewing of your mind. It starts in your mind. So, ladies, you're not stuck, you're not behind, you're not too late. And I've said this before, you are already getting to the path of financial freedom. You just need to start speaking life into it. You need to start seeing a new vision and start journaling truth, because your future depends on what you believe today. The present is the only time we have. And I believe that you're right on time to get it done. So, this is the end of our episode. Thank you so much for listening to this episode of the Financial Flourish podcast. If this episode has motivated you or inspired you or blessed you, do me a favor and share it with a friend. Leave a comment on Spotify. Look us up, Financial Flourish on Spotify. And connect with us also on Instagram at underscore financial flourish. And we would love to hear feedback from you. Now, you can also go to our website as www.absoluteaccountingcpa.com/financial flourish and get your free resources that we've put out there. You can get your budgeting, your self-guide assessment, and also the money mindset reboot workbook that you can use to assist you as you go on this financial journey. So thank you very much for tuning in again, and I look forward to seeing you next week. And take one more step toward your financial goal, and don't forget to flourish.